His mittened hand clutched Tom Calder's coat sleeve. Small fingers, trembling, holding on like a knot pulled tight. The cracked chimney lantern in Tom's other hand sputtered, hissed, coughed light across the frozen ridge. The boy, Evan, leaned close, breath sharp in the cold. "Don't leave," he whispered. The lantern flickered again, a stubborn glow fighting the wind. And Tom felt it, a pull he hadn't known in years, a direction, a purpose, guiding them both toward Christmas. Tom Calder felt the boy's grip long before he understood the fear behind it. Small fingers clamped around his coat sleeve, stiff with cold, refusing to let go. The ridge wind pushed at them, carrying the thin hiss of the cracked chimney lantern in Tom's other hand. That sound had followed him for years. A broken breath, a lonely whisper, the voice of a man walking through life without reason. He had climbed the ridge to be alone again. Christmas Eve meant nothing to him now, nothing but a reminder of the life that wasn't waiting in his cabin anymore. He preferred the dark, the wind, the emptiness, things that didn't ask anything of him. But then the boy had stepped out of the scrub, shaking, eyes wide and raw from cold. And without a word, he had fastened onto Tom's sleeve as if the earth itself might drag him back if he loosened his hold. Tom looked down at him, jaw tight. "Easy, son," he muttered. But Evan only pressed closer, breath trembling in short bursts. The lantern coughed out a flicker, light jumping across the snow like it was trying to find something. Tom hated that sound tonight. It made the world feel hollow. It made him remember. He scanned the ridge. No riders. No tracks but the boys. Just the long stretch of frozen land and the rasp of the lantern hanging between them. "What are you doing out here?" Tom asked, softer than he intended. The boy's reply was barely a voice. "Don't leave." Tom felt something shift in him then, an old, buried thing moving beneath the ears of frost. He didn't want it, didn't ask for it. But the boy's grip down deeper, and Tom understood he couldn't pry himself free without breaking something fragile. The lantern sputtered again, throwing a weak halo around their feet. The ridgewind curled past them like a warning. "Come on," Tom said. He didn't say it kindly. He didn't know how anymore. But he turned toward the cabin all the same. The boy followed without hesitation, still clutching Tom's sleeve, boots dragging in the snow. The lantern swung with their steps, its cracked chimney wheezing with each jolt, sounding almost tired from the journey. By the time they reached the cabin, the sky had deepened into a hard, starless black. Tom pushed the door open, the hinges giving a low groan in the quiet. Warmth drifted out in a thin wave. Evan stepped across the threshold, still gripping Tom's coat, as if afraid the darkness outside might call him back. And Tom let him in. Tom shut the cabin door behind them, and the wind died instantly. Just a hard thump. Silence rushing in after it. The boy stayed close, fingers still caught in Tom's coat sleeve until the warmth inside brushed his face. He blinked up at the lamplight like he didn't trust it. Like warmth was a stranger he wasn't sure deserved his name. Tom eased out of his coat, stiff with frost. Evan didn't let go until the last moment. His hand slipped off slow, almost reluctant, and fell to his side. The cabin breathed round them, old timber sighing, stove ticking as embers settled. He crawled across the floor in thin waves, the sound almost gentle. Tom hung the broken chimney lantern on its peg. It sputtered once, just once, like a tired cough. The boy flinched. "Nothing to fear," Tom muttered. But he heard something in Evan's breath then. An echo of whatever chased him down the ridge. Something colder than winter. Evan stood near the door, stiff as an icicle, eyes moving around the room like each object might bite. Tom recognized the look. A life spent waiting for the next bad thing. He had worn that look himself once. "You hungry?" Tom asked. No answer. Just a nod, small, careful. Tom stepped to the stove, lifting the pot lid. Steam rolled up like a soft ghost. The smell of beans and a hint of salted pork filled the room, warm enough to make the cold outside feel like a different world entirely. He set a bowl on the table. Evan didn't move. Not until Tom stepped back, giving the boy a wide berth, a clear path. Only then did Evan approach, quiet, slow. The spoon clicked against the bowl when he took the first bite. Another click, then a faster one. He was starving. The sound filled the space, knocking at the silence Tom had grown too used to. Tom leaned on the counter, arms folded. "You alone out there?" Evan paused mid-bite. A small tremor ran through him. His shoulders tightened. Then he went right back to eating. Tom let the question hang. He didn't need the answer yet. He'd get it when the boy could breathe without shaking. Outside, the wind pressed against the walls. The cabin settled again, old boards shifting like tired bones. Evan's spoon kept clicking, a soft counterpoint to the storm pushing at the windows. Tom stirred the fire, letting the flames stretch tall. Light rolled across the floor, pooling under the table, washing up Evan's boots. He watched the fire as if memorizing it, as if heat was something he feared might vanish. "You can sleep in the loft," Tom said. "Blankets are clean, haven't been touched in years." Evan swallowed hard, wiped his mouth, and nodded. Still no words beyond that first "don't leave." But the boy's silence wasn't empty. It was heavy, carrying something with it. Tom noticed the boy's hands then. Red, chapped, scratched by brush or rope. Too young for that kind of W. A pulse of unease moved through Tom's chest. He didn't invite trouble, not anymore. But trouble had found him anyway. The lantern hissed on the wall. A weak sputter, almost like it was clearing its throat before speaking. Evan froze at the noise. His eyes flicked to the door. A shadow of panic crossed his face, fast and thin. Tom frowned. "That lamp can't hurt you." The boy didn't answer, but his gaze stayed on the door a long time, as if he expected someone, something, to walk through it. Tom's jaw tightened. Something was wrong. Something beyond hunger and cold. He stepped to the window, lifted the curtain. Darkness stared back. Snow drifted sideways in slow sheets, brushing the glass with soft scratches. No riders. No prints. No shadows. Still, Tom couldn't shake it. The ridge. The boy's grip. The way that cracked lantern seemed to react to him, coughing light like it had opinions. Evan finished the bowl and set it carefully on the table, hands trembling just enough for Tom to see. He stood there, unsure what to do with himself. "Up the ladder," Tom said. "You'll be warmer." Evan moved toward the loft, steps tiny, cautious. Halfway up, the lantern sputtered again, sharper this time. A short, cracking cough of light. The boy stopped on the ladder. Didn't turn. Didn't breathe for a moment. Just listened. Tom felt the air shift. A ripple of unease. The kind that fills a room when a secret is sitting just out of reach. "You're safe here," Tom said. It came out rough, but he meant it. Evan climbed the rest of the way and disappeared into the locked shadows. Tom stood alone now. The stove ticking, the wind scraping the walls, and that lantern giving one last faint hiss, like the warning too quiet to understand. Warmth filled the cabin, but the cold that followed them home. Tom woke before dawn. Old habit. Cold habit. The cabin was quiet except for the slow breathing above him in the loft. Evan slept curled under the blankets, a small hill of warm air rising in the shadows. Tom listened a moment, surprised at the comfort it brought. A sound he hadn't heard in years. He stirred the stove back to life. Logs cracked. Heat pushed into the room in soft waves. The scent of pine sap lifted with the smoke. A ladder creaked. Evan climbed down, hair rumpled, eyes cautious but brighter than last night. He stepped into the warmth like someone re-entering a world he wasn't sure he belonged to. "Morning," Tom said. The word came out stiff, unused. Evan nodded, rubbing his hands close to the stove. His fingers hovered over the heat, almost reverent. Tom set it in mug in front of him. Warm water with a splash of coffee. It wasn't much, but the boy wrapped both hands around it like it was the first good thing he'd held in days. Steam drifted upward. For a heartbeat, the room felt settled. Steady. Then the lantern hissed from its peg by the door. A single, sharp sputter. Like it remembered something the boy tried to forget. Evan's shoulders tightened. Just a flinch. But enough. Tom noticed. And said nothing. He made breakfast, fried biscuits and last night's beans, while Evan followed the sound of his footsteps. Always close. Never touching. But near. Tom worked quietly. The boy ate quietly. But the silence between them began to shift. Not empty anymore. Just waiting. After breakfast, Tom stepped outside to fetch wood. Evan hovered at the doorway, torn between fear of the cold and fear of being alone. "You can come," Tom said. Again, not gentle. But not sharp either. Evan followed. Boots crunching over the thin crust of snow. Breath fogging in little puffs. The yard held the last marks of last night's storm. Snow drifted against the fence. Wind whispered through the pines. Tom chopped wood. Each strike echoed across the tree line, booming like distant thunder. Evan stacked the split logs beside him, arms straining but determined. A tiny rhythm formed. A small partnership. Warmth building against the cold morning. Halfway through, Evan paused. His gaze slid toward the ridge. The same spot from last night. A place where shadows gathered even now. Tom stopped swinging the axe. "You expecting someone?" Evan shook his head. Too fast. Too practiced. Tom didn't push further. He felt the answer tightening in the air anyway. Something, or someone, was still out there. They carried the wood inside. The stove exhaled heat as the fire rose. Warmth filled the room again, wrapping around them like a thick coat. Tom sat at the table, working a whetstone along his knife. Soft scrapes filled the space. Evan drew shapes onto a piece of scrap wood, just lines, circles, places the pencil pressed too hard. The boy wasn't drawing pictures. He was drawing memories. Marks of where he came from, or what he ran from. A gust slammed the window. Both of them jumped. Snow streaked the glass in a sudden swirl. The storm wasn't gone, it was creeping back. Tom checked the door latch. Something about the wind felt, searching. "You cold?" Tom asked. Evan shook his head, but his hands told another story, fingers trembling, not from temperature, but thought. Tom draped a blanket over his shoulders. Evan stiffened for a second, then melted into the warmth like a child finally allowed to rest. The lantern hissed again. Longer this time. A wheezing cough of light. Evan's eyes snapped to it. Fear. Clear as daylight. Tom put the knife down. "Why does that sound bother you?" Evan opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "It sounds like him." Tom's lungs tightened. He didn't know who him was. But the boy did. And the wind did. And that damn lantern definitely did. Tom didn't pry. He simply stood, adjusted the wick, and dimmed the glow until the hiss fell into a soft, harmless whisper. Evan exhaled like someone unclenching after a long fight. His shoulders dropped. His jaw eased. Another small thaw. Afternoon passed in quiet work. Tom fixed a loose window latch. Evan swept the floor, careful, deliberate strokes. The cabin took on a new shape, still his, but different. Less empty. Less echo. They ate supper by the fire. The flames danced. The warmth felt earned. For the first time since the boy arrived, Tom saw something gentle move across Evan's face. Not quite a smile, but something leaning in that direction. Outside, the wind rose again. A low moan sliding over the ridge. A reminder. The world hadn't forgotten them, nor forgiven whatever chased the boy through the snow. Tom set another log on the fire. The room brightened. The shadows pushed back. Heat settled deep into the walls. Evan curled up near the stove, blanket around him, eyes heavy. Tom sat in his chair, listening to the crackle of wood and the soft breath of a child drifting into sleep. Warmth held the cabin steady. But somewhere on that ridge, cold footsteps were still searching. Dawn crept in pale and thin, a weak gold edge slipping through the frosted window. Tom stoked the stove, listening to the fire breathe awake. Warmth rolled through the cabin in slow waves. Evan sat at the table, wrapped in his blanket, watching the flames. His face calm. His hands knotted, fingers tapping the wood in a restless, uneven rhythm. "You sleep all right?" Tom asked. A small nod. But Evan's eyes drifted toward the door, the same way they had just today. That subtle flinch again. Barely there, but sharp enough to catch. Tom poured water into a tin pot, set it near the heat. The sizzle filled the air, soft and steady. A nice sound. A grounding sound. Evan didn't seem to hear it. He was listening to something else. Something outside. Tom followed his gaze. Just trees. Snow. A stretch of wide untouched by morning. "What are you looking for?" Tom asked. Evan shook his head. Not an answer, just a refusal. Then the tapping returned. Faster now. A little storm in his fingers. Tom moved about the cabin, fixing small things that didn't need fixing. Loose nails. A crooked shelf. Anything to keep from watching the boy unravel in silence. He lifted the cracked chimney lantern from its peg. The moment his hand brushed the base, the lantern sputtered. A sharp cough of light. Evan jolted like he'd been struck. Tom narrowed his eyes. "You afraid of this?" Another head shake. Too fast. Too practiced. The room felt tighter. Heat pooling around them while the outside cold pressed at the walls. Breakfast passed slow. Fork scraping. Fire popping. Snow hissing against the windows. Evan ate, but he kept glancing at the lantern, watching it like it might wake up and speak. Afterward, Tom grabbed his coat. "Need to check the traps," he said. "You're coming." Evan hesitated. Only a breath. Then he slid off the chair and followed. Outside, the cold bit them clean. Harsh air. Hard ground. Snow seeping into boots, seams, and stinging ankles. Their footsteps cracked the crusted snow. Sharp. Rhythmic. Too loud for the quiet morning. A rabbit had sprung one trap. Another held nothing but scattered prints. Tom crouched, studying the tracks. Evan knelt beside him. His breath came quick. Short. Uneasy. "Tracks head east," Tom murmured. "Animal?" Evan didn't answer. His eyes locked on the ridge. Same place each time. As if the cold wind spoke a language only he could hear. They walked back in silence. The cabin waited like an ember in the snow. Warmth ready. Door slightly frosted. Inside, Evan hovered near the fire. Tom shook off his coat, watching the boy through the corner of his eye. "You expecting someone to show?" Tom asked. Not gentle. Not cruel. Just plain. Direct. Evan clutched the blanket closer. "Not someone," he whispered. "Something." The words stopped Tom mid-motion. He waited, but the boy pressed his lips together and retreated into silence. A log popped in the stove. Sparks swirled inside like fireflies. Warmth filled the room again, but the corners felt cold. Evan drifted to the small window, peering out through the fogged glass. Tom stepped beside him. Nothing out there but trees, shadows, wind-stirred snow. Still, Evan's voice came then. He followed us. Tom felt the air thicken. Not from heat, from truth. 2. Evan swallowed, then breathed out slow. The man with the papers. Tom's jaw tightened. A stranger with papers didn't come for a child without reason. And reason usually meant trouble. The lantern sputtered behind them. A long, scraping hiss. Evan flinched so hard the blanket slipped from his shoulders. Tom turned. The lantern hung still. Not moving. Not touched. Yet burning uneven, the flame flickering like a heartbeat out of rhythm. Evan's face went pale. "He has a light like that," he whispered. Same sound. Tom stepped closer to the lantern, lowering his voice. "This isn't him." Evan shook his head. "But it remembers." The words were strange, but true in some way Tom could feel. Like the lantern had seen something, carried something, held a memory the boy recognized. The room felt colder, though the fire burned strong. Outside, wind scraped the cabin again. A thin wail curled around the eaves, almost human, almost calling. Tom closed the curtains and stepped between Evan and the door. "You're safe here," he said. Evan didn't argue, didn't move, just stared at the lantern, waiting for the next spotter, waiting for the world outside to knock. Warmth wrapped the cabin in soft layers. But in the corners, in the windows, in the shifting shadows, the cold kept whispering. And the mystery of who followed the boy, and why, was starting to breathe. Snow drifted sideways all afternoon, sweeping across the ridge in long, white sheets. Tom watched it through the window, arms folded, jaw grinding slow. Storm coming, or something wearing the shape of one. Evan sat near the fire, carving soft patterns into a scrap of pine. Small circles, uneven lines. A map that wasn't a map. A memory spilling out in shapes he never named. Tom didn't interrupt, but he studied each cut of the blade, each pause in the boy's breath. Patterns meant something, and this one was tightening around them like a rope. The stove snapped sharply. A burst of sparks danced up the pipe. Evan flinched and looked toward the door. Again. Always the door. Tom followed his gaze. Nothing moved. Nothing knocked. But the cold pressing against the wood felt heavier today, like a shoulder leaning in from the outside. "You're jumpy," Tom said. Evan didn't answer. Just threw another line. Deeper. Harder. Tom stepped to the window, wiping away the condensation with the back of his knuckles. The ridge stretched out in muted gray. Shadow trees. Snow-worn brush. And then, tracks. Fresh ones. Not wildlife. Not wind marks. Horse tracks. Heavy and purposeful, leading along the tree line toward the far slope. Tom felt a slow prickle crawl up his spine. Someone was circling. He didn't call Evan over. Didn't want the boy to see. He simply let the curtain fall back into place, shutting out the sight but not the truth. A moment later, the lantern hissed. Sharp. Twice. A stuttering breath of light that filled the room with unease. Evan's hand stopped carving. His shoulders tightened. He didn't look at the lantern this time. He didn't need to. Tom exhaled through his nose. "Look at me," he said. Evan raised his eyes. Wide. Afraid. "Those tracks out there, do you know who they belong to?" Tom asked. Evan's fingers slipped from the pine scrap. It fell to the floor with a dull tap. "He's looking," Evan whispered. "Has men with him?" Tom's jaw clenched. "Why?" The boy swallowed hard. "He wants me back." The words fell heavy, landing in the room like cold iron. Tom felt the shape of them settle, and didn't like any part of it. He went to the door, lifted the iron bar halfway, then stopped. Bolting it wouldn't stop a determined man, but it might buy time, or send a message. He lowered the bar gently and stepped away. A locked door could smell like fear, and Tom had enough of that scent in the room already. Afternoon dimmed into a smoky dusk. Wind lashed the walls. Snow rattled against the glass like thrown pebbles. Tom cooked supper, though neither of them was hungry. The cabin felt smaller with night huddling around it. The air too warm inside, too thin outside. Evan finally spoke as Tom ladled beans into bowls. "He carries papers," the boy murmured. "Shows them to folks. Says I belong to him." Tom Frost. "Papers don't own people." Evan stared at the fire as if it were the only truth he trusted. "He thinks they do." Tom set the ladle down, metal clinking against the rim. There it was. The shape behind the fear. A man with law-colored lies and a hunger for control. Outside, a faint sound drifted on the wind. Not hoofbeats, too soft, but close enough to jolt Tom's pulse. Evan stiffened. He heard it too. Tom moved to the window but didn't lift the curtain. Sometimes silence saw more clearly than eyes. The snow hissed against the wall. A low murmur of hoofs faded in the distance. Someone was patrolling the ridge, marking the ground, testing how close they could ride before being noticed. Tom stepped back to the table. "Eat," he said. A command, not comfort. But the boy obeyed. Halfway through the meal, the lantern sputtered again. Long, uneven, a shivering stutter of flame that cast the walls into jerking shadows. Evan gripped the edge of the table. "Please," he whispered. "Don't let him take me." Tom didn't answer right away. Didn't promise anything he couldn't deliver. But something in him, the part buried under years of frost, shifted. A decision forming like heat in a cold forge. He placed a steady hand on the table, grounding the moment. "You're here," he said. "And no one rides off with you. Not while I'm breathing." Evan exhaled, small and shaky. The lantern steadied for a heartbeat. Its flame softened, then flared again, bright, warning, alive. Night closed tight around the cabin. The storm eased, but the air outside carried a different weight. Human weight. Tracks waiting to deepen. Eyes searching from the dark. Tom checked the rifle leaning. Snow had fallen quiet in the night. The kind of quiet that didn't belong to peace. Tom felt it before he opened his eyes. A heavy stillness. A waiting. He rose from his bunk and crossed to the window. Frost feathered the glass. Beyond it, tracks again. Fresh ones. Cutting a sharp line along the ridge, looping toward the back of the property where the pine shadows grew thick. Evan sat at the table, already awake, blanket around his shoulders. He wasn't looking at the fire. He was staring at the window, as if he'd been waiting for Tom to see what he already knew. Tom didn't speak, didn't reassure, didn't pretend. He just lowered the curtain and kept his voice steady. "Eat something." Evan nodded but didn't reach for the plate. His hands stayed wrapped around himself, gripping the blanket tight. The fire crackled behind him, pushing warmth toward his back, but the boy still shivered. Tom stepped to the stove, stirring the pot. Beans warmed. Pork fat melted. The smell of breakfast filled the cabin, rich, heavy, meant to anchor them to the moment. The lantern on the wall sputtered. A long, scraping hiss. Evan's breath caught. Tom's jaw tightened. That lantern wasn't just a light anymore. It was a warning. and it seemed to cough whenever something moved out on the ridge. He ladled food into 2 tin bowls, set one in front of the boy, but Evan pushed his away. "Tom," he whispered. "They're closer." Tom didn't ask how he knew. He'd learned in the last 2 days that Evan's fear wasn't imagination. It was memory reawakened. He took a slow breath. "We'll handle it." The boy didn't look convinced, and Tom didn't blame him. Outside, a faint thump broke the quiet. Snow shifting under a heavy step. Then another. Then silence swallowing the sound. Evan flinched hard enough his chair scraped the floor. Tom moved to the door and unbolted it, opening it only a crack. A cold blade of air slid inside. Sharp. Thin. Carrying the faint echo of horses, distant but circling. He shut the door again. Harder than he meant to. Evan stood now, no longer sitting, blanket dragging on the floor. "They won't stop," he said. His voice small. Final. Tom's mind worked through the angles. Ridge to the east. Creek to the west. Tree line thick behind the cabin. Perfect blind for men who wanted to get close without being seen. He checked the rifle. Loaded. Clean. Not yet shouldered. He didn't want to make this a war he couldn't step back from. But war was knocking. Softly now. Soon louder. He went outside again, this time with Evan at his side. Snow bit their faces, dry and sharp as glass dust. The ridge stood quiet. Too quiet. Tom crouched near a cluster of tracks by the barn. Evan hovered behind him, barely breathing. "Horses," Tom murmured. 3, maybe 4. Evan shut his eyes. "Ahead of us now," he whispered. "He'll be here soon." Something inside Tom flared. Not anger. Not quite fear. But a deep knotted resolve that twisted into place. They gathered wood together. Tom chopping. Evan stacking. Their breaths puffed in quick white bursts. The noise of the axe felt wrong, too loud, too inviting for listening ears along the ridge. Halfway through splitting a log, Tom stopped. Lifted his head. Listened. Silence responded. Thick. Breathless. A silence that didn't belong to empty land. "Inside," Tom said. Evan hurried ahead, boots crunching the snow in a frantic rhythm. Tom followed, feeling the cold on his back like a presence leaning over his shoulder. Inside, the warmth closed around him. But it felt thinner, like a blanket stretched too far. Tom bolted the door this time. Not for fear, but for time. Evan sat near the stove again, rocking slightly, eyes locked on the lantern. The flame flickered erratically. Dying. Returning. Dying again. Tom approached it slowly. The glass felt warm under his hand. Too warm. The flame inside jittered like a heartbeat in panic. "What does he want with you?" Tom asked. Evan swallowed. "My mother's papers," he whispered. "They say the land is hers. Mine now." Tom stared at the lantern. A lantern that spotted every time the boy spoke truth. Every time danger crept closer. He felt the pieces shifting. A man riding the ridge with forged papers. A child claimed like property. A lantern reacting like it carried secrets in its cracked bones. Wind slammed the shutters suddenly. Hard. Once. Twice. The storm broke just before dawn. Not with thunder. Not with wind. But with silence. A deep, unnatural quiet that settled over the ridge like a held breath. Tom felt it before he opened his eyes. The kind of stillness that warned a man trouble had arrived and was standing just beyond the door. He rode slow, boots scraping the floorboards. The cabin's warmth clung to him, thick and heavy, as if trying to anchor him in place. Evan stirred in the loft above, blankets rustling. A small sound in a morning that otherwise made no noise at all. Tom stepped to the window. His breath fogged the pain. He wiped it with the back of his hand. Men. 3 of them. Mounted and waiting near the tree line. Silas Granger's riders. They weren't hiding today. They wanted to be seen. Tracks cut a bold line through the fresh snow. A boundary. A message. Evan climbed down the ladder, rubbing his eyes. But the moment he saw Tom's face, he froze halfway to the bottom rung. "They're here," he whispered. Tom didn't turn from the window. "They're here." The fire popped in the stove. A soft burst of sparks. It was the only warm sound in the world, turning colder by the heartbeat. Evan stepped beside him, small and shaking. He didn't need to look outside to know. His breath already trembled with recognition. Tom gripped the curtain edge. "Stay behind me." A knock echoed across the valley. Not on the cabin door, on a rider's saddle horn. 3 slow taps, and then a 4th. Like a call. Like a countdown. Tom felt the sound roll through his ribs. He opened the door a crack. Cold air knifed through the opening. Sharp. Thin. The kind of cold that carried intent. The lead rider nudged his horse forward. A tall man with a red scarf and a rifle laid casual across his saddle. He didn't bother to smile. "Morning, Calder," he called. "Boss wants a word." Tom stepped onto the porch. No coat. No hat. Just a man standing in the cold, letting it bite him. "What's your business?" Tom asked. The rider's horse pawed at the snow. "Boy, you got inside. He belongs to Silas Granger. Got papers saying so." Behind Tom, Evan's breath hitched. A thin sound. Barely more than air. Tom didn't look back. Didn't give the riders the satisfaction. "Papers don't make a child property," he said. The rider shrugged. "Out here, papers are louder than most men's morals." Tom stepped forward until his boots met the line cut into the snow by the riders' horses. The boundary. A deliberate mark. "I dare." "This line," Tom said, voice low. "You draw it?" "I." The rider's grin was slow, mean. "And crossing it means taking sides. Boss wants the boy. Best hand him over before we come in and ask less polite." Evan stepped onto the porch then. Tom felt the movement behind him, small and faint. The boy clinging to the door frame for balance, fear tightening around him like a second skin. Evan didn't answer. Didn't blink. But his breath fogged fast in the cold. Too fast. The lantern inside the cabin hissed from its peg. A burst of sputtering light. The sound slithered across the porch and down Tom's spine like a warning. The rider heard it too. His eyes flicked toward the doorway. "What's wrong with that thing?" Tom lifted his chin. "It knows trouble when it hears it." The rider laughed once. Short. Dry. "You got till sundown, Calder." He snapped the reins. The horses turned. Snow sprayed from their hooves, and the riders slipped back into the trees, swallowed by the muted light of morning. Evan sank to the porch railing, legs folding under him. "They'll take me," he whispered. "They always do." Tom knelt beside him. The wind curled around them both, carrying the faint rustle of the riders settling back into position along the ridge. A silent net tightening. "No," Tom said. "Not a comfort. A vow." Evan looked up, eyes wet, breath shaking. "You can't stop them." Tom placed a hand on his shoulder. A steady weight, warm against the cold. "I ain't crossing their line," he said. "They crossed mine." Inside, the lantern sputtered again. Longer this time. A flicker bright as defiance. Tom strode. Evan followed. Both casting long shadows across the snow. Shadows that stretched over the boundary, marking their own claim. The sun stayed low. The ridge stayed quiet. But the line in the snow had been drawn on both sides now. Warmth held inside the cabin. Cold gathered outside. And the day would end with only one of them left standing. Evening dropped fast on the ridge. No color. No mercy. Just a hard blue dusk swallowing the land. Tom felt the cold creeping under the door before the sun was fully gone. Evan sat beside the fire, knees clung tight, eyes fixed on the lantern hanging from its peg. Its flames spotted in January bursts, uneven, frightened. The sound matched the boy's breathing. Tom tightened his coat and checked the rifle again. Loaded. Ready. But he didn't lift it. Not yet. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The cold punched his lungs. Silence wrapped the valley. Too clean. Too careful. Across the ridge, the first rider appeared. Then another. Then Silas Granger himself, broad, arrogant, sitting his horse like the land belonged to him by cosmic decree. His voice rolled across the snow. Calder, time's up. Tom didn't answer. Didn't blink. He simply stood there, letting the cold fill every seam of him until nothing could move him. Evan slipped to Tom's side, clutching the doorway. He trembled so hard the wood rattled faintly. But he stayed. Close. Visible. A mistake Granger wanted. A bait he counted on. Granger nudged his mount forward. You harbor what's mine, he said. Boys under my protection. Papers say so. Tom stepped off the porch. Boots sinking into the snow. His breath rose in thick clouds. Papers ain't worth spit when they're forged, he said. His voice low. Steady. A stone prone into deep water. Granger lifted a folded document, waving it like a flag. This is the law. Tom walked closer. Not to fight. Not to shoot. But to show the man something he didn't expect. He reached into his coat. Pulled out the cracked lantern. The same lantern that sputtered each time Evan remembered. Each time danger crept near. He held it high. The wind curled around the broken chimney. The flame coughed inside, then flared. Bright. Accusing. Tom's voice carried. This belonged to Evan's mother. Granger's jaw twitched. Just enough to show the truth bleeding around the edges of his lies. Inside its base, Tom continued, I found her signature, her deed, and your counterfeit mark scratched over the top. A ripple moved through Granger's men. Unease. Whispers. Tom didn't stop. He stepped even closer, crossing the line Granger had carved in the snow hours before. The land is the boys', Tom said. Not yours. Silence cracked. Cold and sharp. Granger's eyes hardened. You think you can sway my men with a lantern and a story? Tom finally lowered the lantern. Set it gently in the snow. Its flame flickered, then steadied. A quiet truth glowing in the dusk. Not sway them, Tom said. Remind them. Behind Granger, one rider shifted in his saddle. Another lowered his rifle. Small movements. Not rebellion yet, but cracks. Granger saw it too, and rage flared like gunpowder. He drew his pistol. Fast. Desperate. Edwin cried out, voice breaking. Tom. The boy's scream ripped the air open. The sound of a childhood lost too much to lose again. It pushed Tom forward without thought. A man acting from a place deeper than fear. Deeper than duty. He moved. Snow sprang beneath him. Granger fired. The bullet tore past Tom's shoulder, slicing cloth, grazing skin. Tom slammed into him. The force knocked the pistol loose. It skidded across the snow. A rider shouted. Another reached for his own gun. Conflict erupted like a branch snapping. Tom didn't hesitate. He swung the butt of his rifle across Granger's jaw. A hard, final crack. The man dropped into the snow, breathing, but beaten. 2 riders dismounted, not to fight, to pull Granger back, fear souring the cold air around him. "He forged it?" one asked, his voice unsteady, uncertain. Tom nodded. "Found the real deed myself." Evan stepped forward now. Just a few small steps, but enough. He held the lantern, its glow steady in his hands. "That's my mother's," he whispered. "She hid the truth in it." Another crack in Granger's men, doubt spreading like thaw in early spring. One rider grabbed the reins of Granger's horse. Another backed away from the line in the snow. Tom stood between them and the boy. The cold curled around him. The warmth of the cabin pulsed at his back. "Take him," Tom said, nodding to Silas, "and get off my ridge." No one argued. Not now. Not with the truth open in the snow and the boy standing behind it. The riders lifted Granger, dragging him toward the trees. No threats. No last lair. Just silence. Weighty and bruised. When the last hoofbeat faded into the night, Tom turned. Evan still held the lantern close, its light warm. Still, alive in a way it hadn't been before. Tom put a hand on the boy's shoulder. A firm, steady anchor. "It's over," he said. Evan nodded, tears warm on his cold cheeks. But the lantern's soft glow told the truth first. The danger was gone. And the stand had been made. Snow settled quiet after the riders vanished, leaving the ridge pale and emptied of menace. Tom stood in the doorway a long moment, feeling the cold thin out, feeling the danger bleed into distance. Evan clutched the lantern to his chest, its warm circle of light trembling against the night. "Come inside," Tom said, his voice rough, tired, but steady. Evan followed him into the cabin, shutting the door with a soft thumb. The warmth of the stove wrapped around them, thick and welcoming after the bitter air outside. The lantern hissed once, not warning this time. Just breath. Almost relief. Tom knelt beside the table and set his rifle aside. Evan stood near him, head lowered, small hands tight around the lantern's handle. The flame inside swayed gently, casting long shadows that stretched across the floorboards. "You said it belonged to your mother," Tom murmured. Evan nodded. "She kept it with her always, even when things got bad." Tom waited. Didn't push. Just let the quiet settle between them like soft snow on a roof. Finally, Evan lifted the lantern onto the table. The base scraped faintly, a dry whisper of metal against wood. "My mother said this lantern knew the truth," he whispered. "She said if I ever needed help, it would show someone the way." Tom ran his thumb across the cracked chimney. Old glass. Old injuries. A life etched into the seams. "Tell me what happened," he said. Evan swallowed. Slow. Hard. "Silas came to our land with papers," he said. "He said Mama owed him. Said she signed things she never signed. But she fought him." The boy's voice cracked. "She hid the real papers in the lantern. Told me to run if she didn't come back from the ridge." Tom felt the truth settle heavy and certain. The tracks. The boy's fear. The lantern's awful stutter every time danger crept near. It had all been pointing here. Evan pulled in a shaking breath. He caught her, took her away. I saw him do it. Snow hit the window softly, a gentle hush, as if the night itself bowed its head. Tom clenched his jaw. He'd seen men like Granger before. Men who used law as a noose. Men who mistook power for right. Men who forgot children remembered everything. "You did right," Tom said. "Running. Surviving." Evan blinked, tears hanging on his lashes. "But Mama, she never got to show anyone the real deed." Tom lifted the lantern, held it close to the firelight. The glow passed through the glass and caught the hidden seam at the base. A faint line. A concealed plate. Invisible unless someone knew to look. He pressed his thumb to it. Felt the shift. The click. The lantern opened. A thin slip of folded paper slid out, corners browned with age, edges bent from years of hiding. Tom unfolded it carefully. Words unfurled like buried breath. A deed. A signature. Evan's mother's mark, clear and true. Underneath it, a second signature. Silas Granger's. Overwritten. Scratched in with a different ink. A liar's ink. Evan covered his mouth. "That's it," he whispered. "The truth." Tom nodded slowly. "This is more than truth," he said. "This is freedom." The lantern flickered in agreement. A calm, warm pulse that filled the cabin with a quiet glow. Not fear. Not warning. Just steadiness. Tom set the deed on the table and put a hand on the boy's shoulder. Warm. Firm. Anchoring. "Your mother didn't just leave you something to run with," he said. "She left you something to stand on." Evan's breath shuddered. His tears fell fast now, but they weren't only grief. They were release. Recognition. A soft, breaking relief that something sacred had survived. The stove cracked. A log settled. Warmth filled every corner of the cabin, pushing back the cold that had lived there too long. Evan leaned into Tom's side, tentative at first, then certain. A small weight. A needed one. For the first time since the ridge, the lantern didn't sputter. Didn't hiss. Didn't warn. Its light stayed smooth. Sure. Revealing everything they needed to see. Tom woke to a quiet that felt different than all the quiets before it. Not the cold kind. Not the dangerous kind. A gentle stillness, warm as breath on a winter morning. The sort of quiet a man didn't brace against. The kind that settled on the skin like a soft hand. Evan was already up, sitting near the stove, feeding small sticks into the fire with careful hands. Precise hands. A boy's hands learning steadiness after too much shaking. The flames rose soft and steady. No sputter. No panic. Just a clean, orange glow that warmed the room from the floorboards to the rafters. The lantern hung near the door, chimney freshly mended with wire Tom had bent himself. Its flame burned smooth. A calm, even pulse. As if the light had finally learned how to rest. As if they had finally given it permission. Tom stretched, the floorboards creaking under his boots, and crossed to the pot of morning coffee. The smell drifted through the cabin, rich and grounding. A scent that felt like a promise. Evan breathed it in with a small, content sound, barely audible but full of meaning. "You sleep any?" Tom asked. Evan nodded. A little. Didn't dream the bad things. Simple words. But the weight in them loosened something in Tom's chest. Tom poured him a cup, mostly warm water with a little coffee, but Evan held it like it was gold. Steam lifted between them. Warm. Hopeful. Brightening the morning more than the fire itself. For a while they ate in silence. A different silence now. Not hollow. Not watchful. Just simple. Shared. The kind families must sound like a dawn, Tom thought. When breakfast was done, Tom put on his coat and motioned for Evan to follow. The boy grabbed the lantern from its peg, as if by instinct. As if it belonged in his hand. It didn't hiss at his touch. Just glowed steady, lighting their steps as they stepped outside. Snow gleamed under the rising sun. A fresh layer, untouched. No tracks. No riders waiting in the tree line. Just winter settling soft over the ridge, folding the world in clean white. Evan stopped at the porch rail and looked out across the valley. Not searching for shadows this time. Just looking. Like someone seeing a world that finally belonged to him. A world that no longer hunted him. Tom handed him the deed. Evan held it carefully, fingers tracing the edges, eyes widening with something deep and trembling. "This is really ours?" the boy whispered. Tom nodded. "Yours first. Mine. Only if you want me here." A pause. A breath. Evan didn't hesitate. "You're staying." Something warm cracked open inside Tom. Small. Quiet. But deeply real. A thought that reached places he thought winter had claimed for good. They walked the property together, slow steps, boots sinking into soft snow. Tom pointed out the creek line, the old post markers, the half-fallen fence that would need rebuilding come spring. Evan listened, eyes bright, questions rising like birds startled from a nest. Tom woke to a quiet that felt different than all the quiets before it. Not the cold kind, not the dangerous kind. A gentle stillness, warm as breath on a winter morning. The sort of quiet a man didn't brace against. The kind that settled on the skin like a soft hand. Evan was already up, sitting near the stove, feeding small sticks into the fire with careful hands. Precise hands. A boy's hands learning steadiness after too much shaking. The flames rose soft and steady. No sputter. No panic. Just a clean, orange glow that warmed the room from the floorboards to the rafters. The lantern hung near the door, chimney freshly mended with wire Tom had bent himself. Its flame burned smooth, a calm, even pulse, as if the light had finally learned how to rest, as if they had finally given it permission. Tom stretched, the floorboards creaking under his boots, and crossed to the pot of morning coffee. The smell drifted through the cabin, rich and grounding, a scent that felt like a promise. Evan breathed it in with a small, content sound, barely audible but full of meaning. "You sleep any?" Tom asked. Evan nodded. A little. Didn't dream the bad things. Simple words. But the weight in them loosened something in Tom's chest. Tom poured him a cup, mostly warm water with a little coffee, but Evan held it like it was gold. Steam lifted between them. Warm. Hopeful. Brightening the morning more than the fire itself. For a while they ate in silence. A different silence now. Not hollow. Not watchful. Just simple. Shared. The kind families must sound like a dawn, Tom thought. When breakfast was done, Tom put on his coat and motioned for Evan to follow. The boy grabbed the lantern from its peg, as if by instinct. As if it belonged in his hand. It didn't hiss at his touch. Just glowed steady, lighting their steps as they stepped outside. Snow gleamed under the rising sun. A fresh layer, untouched. No tracks. No riders waiting in the tree line. Just winter settling soft over the ridge, folding the world in clean white. Evan stopped at the porch rail and looked out across the valley. Not searching for shadows this time. Just looking. Like someone seeing a world that finally belonged to him. A world that no longer hunted him. Tom handed him the deed. Evan held it carefully, fingers tracing the edges, eyes widening with something deep and trembling. "This is really ours?" the boy whispered. Tom nodded. "Yours first. Mine. Only if you want me here." A pause. A breath. Evan didn't hesitate. "You're staying." Something warm cracked open inside Tom. Small. Quiet. But deeply real. A thought that reached places he thought winter had claimed for good. They walked the property together, slow steps, boots sinking into soft snow. Tom pointed out the creek line, the old post markers, the half-fallen fence that would need rebuilding come spring. Evan listened. Eyes bright. Questions rising like birds startled from a nest. If this story stirred a memory or two, saddle up with us again. Hit subscribe and help keep these old frontier tales alive. Out here, every name, every trail, Every sunset still matters. So till we meet again, friend, keep your hat tipped to the past and your heart pointed west.